The wind pulled at the ledge, but the man did not lean back. He stood at the very edge of the rooftop, his hands locked into fists, trembling with a rhythm that matched the distant, pulsing hum of the city below. Down there, the world was a blur of motion. Headlights streaked across the pavement like rushing blood, and the muffled sound of laughter drifted upward, thin and hollow. It was a sound from a life he no longer recognized. He stared into the abyss of the street, watching the people move with a purpose he had lost hours ago. Every light in every window was a reminder of a reality that continued to breathe, to work, and to exist. While his own world had simply ceased to function, he shifted his weight, the gravel crunching under his boots, but he did not look away. The city was indifferent to the figure standing against the sky. He was a ghost watching the living, waiting for the final moment to let go. 3 hours earlier, the air in the hospital room had been thick with the smell of antiseptic. He sat by the bed, his hand covering a tiny, fragile one. The machines hummed a steady, rhythmic pulse that felt like a countdown. Then, the door opened. The doctor walked in, his footsteps heavy, his face set in a rigid, unyielding line. He stopped at the foot of the bed. "We have done everything," the doctor said, his voice low. "But without the surgery, she will not survive." The figure on the bed did not move. The man felt his throat tighten. "How much?" he asked. The doctor paused, then spoke the number. $200,000. The room went silent. The man looked at his wallet, then at the machines. He left the hospital and began the dismantling of his life. He sold the car. He sold the house. He stripped his life down to the bare essentials, watching his history vanish into a stack of paper. He counted the money in the dim light of his empty apartment. It was a fraction of what was needed. He counted it again, his fingers shaking, hoping the numbers would change, but they remained fixed. The math was simple, cold, and final. He was failing. Every sale, every sacrifice, every hour spent in the scramble only brought him closer to the edge. He was running out of time, and the pile of cash was a mountain he could not climb. The park bench was freezing. He sat there, hands buried in his pockets, watching the city lights flicker like dying embers. A shadow detached itself from the darkness. A man, his face etched with lines of age and grime, sat down beside him. The stranger did not look at him, but his voice was steady. "You look like someone who lost everything." The man let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "I did." He poured it all out, the hospital, the debt, the silence of his daughter's room. The stranger listened, his gaze fixed on the distance. Then he turned. "What if I told you I can help?" The man froze. Skepticism clawed at his chest, but the desperation was louder. "You?" he whispered. The stranger simply smiled and pressed a folded piece of paper into his palm. The next morning, the man stood before a monolith of glass and steel. Luxury cars glided into the drive, and security guards stood like stone statues. He entered, his heart hammering against his ribs. The receptionist looked up, her gaze cool and dismissive. "Do you have an appointment?" He shook his head and placed the crumpled paper on the desk. Her eyes scanned the note, and in an instant, the indifference vanished. The office was vast, silent, and smelled of polished wood and old paper. A man sat behind a desk of dark mahogany, his posture relaxed, his eyes sharp and knowing. He stood as the guest entered, his movements fluid and precise. "I heard," the man began, his voice calm, "that you met my brother." The guest froze, his mind struggling to bridge the gap between the man on the park bench and the titan standing before him. "Brother?" he stammered, the word feeling hollow in the immense space. The mogul smiled, a genuine warmth reaching his eyes. "He chooses to live on the streets to find those who truly deserve help." The mogul reached into a folder and pulled out a single, thick document. He slid it across the polished surface of the desk. It was the authorization for the surgery. The guest stared at the paper, his breath hitching in his chest. The weight of the last few weeks vanished. His knees gave way. He sank into the chair, his hands covering his face as a ragged, uncontrollable sob tore through his chest. Weeks later, the sterile silence of the hospital was a memory. The apartment door swung open, and the girl sprinted across the floor, her laughter bright and steady. She collided with his chest, her arms locking around his neck. He held her, feeling the rhythm of her heart. Against his own, a steady, healthy pulse that had once been a fading echo. He was no longer the man who stood on the edge of a rooftop. He had been pulled back from the brink, and now he had a purpose. Every afternoon, he walked to the same park bench where his life had changed. He did not sit in defeat. He sat with his eyes on the path, watching for the broken, the desperate, and the lost. When he saw them, he did not look away. He moved to make space on the bench, ready to listen, ready to offer the same hand that had once saved him.